I'd like to begin by introducing you to some impressive people that I've worked with lately. Meet Dilshad. He was born in Syria, and like so many who have managed to leave, he still worries constantly about family members there who face the daily horrors of that war. So Dilshad created AIMTA, a mobile app that tracks the trajectory of fired missiles and it sends warnings to get out of the way by email, by text, and social media. They're about 7 to 10 minutes before a missile will land. And this is Rachel, who moved to Kenya, and she created an organization called Sisi ni Amani, which means we are peace in Swahili. And they were part of a very innovative text messaging campaign called PeaceText that was used to diffuse deadly violence during the last Kenyan elections using carefully worded, carefully timed messages like the one that you see there on the screen. And in Haiti's Cité des Soleil slums, Luino used crowd mapping tools to figure out where to optimally locate solar-powered lights to help prevent gang violence, as well as the rapes that were happening there in the darkness. And meet my friend Sanjana, who created Ground Views, a citizen journalism website to give Sri Lankans a voice in that bloody conflict and a way to share life-saving information. These are just a few of the many, many inspiring faces that I meet in my work, and frankly, the reason I left my job in the corporate sector a few years ago to return to work in conflict zones that I had first done in the 1990s. I brought a picture of me with my team in the 1990s, our radio team in Liberia. I have changed a lot in the last 20 years, so see if you can pick me out. This is the Talking Drum Studio, formed in 1997. An extraordinary group of people who have continued to broadcast through the wars, through the Ebola crisis, and as I say, just courageous, inspiring individuals, as are this new breed of peace builders that I just introduced you to. And they are leaders in what more and more people are calling peace tech, which is using data, technology, and media in innovative ways to try to stop the violence in their communities. There are literally thousands of people figuring out new innovative ways to tackle old drivers of conflict with these new tools. So you might think that these would be the best of times in our field, that we'd have peace breaking out all over the world. And as we all know from the headlines that we read every single day, that's not the case. From Afghanistan to Yemen, Kenya, Ukraine, war is abounding. And one reason is because the same simple, unprecedented, amazing truth that is empowering those young peace builders I just showed you is also empowering the authoritarian regimes and the violent extremists of the world, ISIS, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda. So how do we amplify the effect of the effect of peace tech, the ability of peace tech to save lives and do good? How do we amplify its ability to save lives above that of the same technologies that are being used by the violent extremists to cause harm, hatred, and death in the world? How do we have peace tech be more impactful? That question is a question that my colleagues and I at the U.S. Institute of Peace have been wrestling with for the last 5 years. We've been working with experts and activists alike in most of the conflict countries of the world. And their answers to that question are very diverse. But there's one thing that every one of them seems to agree on, and that is we need scale. We need more peace tech, more users, in more places, more often. AIMTA, for example, the creator ran out of money and it went dark before he had enough subscribers. And that PeaceText initiative, very innovative, worked well in a handful of communities in Kenya, but only a handful of communities. So like so many peace tech initiatives, it turned out to be little more than a pilot program. So how do we get the kind of scale that is more than just 1,000 flowers blooming? Whole books, as you know, have been written about how companies and how industries achieve scale. But none of them, to our knowledge, focuses on the unique challenges of working in conflict contexts, in conflict countries. So that's what we did. And it led us to an interesting place, and perhaps we shouldn't have been surprised by this, because it is one of the most successful examples of scale in modern history, even in a conflict context, and that is the defense industry. So we learned that there were really two key factors in the ability of the defense industry to scale. One was the need for specialized tech know-how. So the US government shifted its funding from government munitions factories to the private sector because it needed the specialized tech know-how to keep up with modernized weaponry, mechanized armor, and so forth. And the second factor is that it created jobs. The government continued to fund private sector defense contractors even after great wars would end because it was essentially a jobs program in America. It employed people in nearly every quarter of America. So very interesting, right? The two key factors that led to the expansion of the defense industry are very much present today. One, the need for specialized tech know-how, and two, the need for jobs. And they're present on a global scale. Only now, our leaders are calling for a different approach. As Secretary Gates said, we have to focus our energies beyond the guns and steel of the military. So today, let me suggest to you that this different approach, beyond the guns and steel of the military, and the way to scale PeaceTech so that its power to save lives eclipses that of the power of those technologies to be used by violent extremists, is to think about building an industry, a PeaceTech industry, an industry that specializes in the design, development, and deployment of those same kinds of technologies that I showed you at the outset that help to prevent violence and build peace. The messaging platforms, the crowdsourcing, the crowd mapping, the early warning devices. And imagine that this industry also alleviates unemployment, creates jobs, especially in conflict countries where unemployment, particularly among young males who do most of the fighting, is staggeringly high, over 30% in many of these conflict countries. So the investment for such an industry needs to begin with government, as it did 100 years ago with the defense industry. But just some of the investment. The rest of the investment needs to come from really a change in our thinking. For too long, we have thought of the people who do peace building as the UN Blue Helmets, our soldiers, our diplomats. For too long, we have counted on government and international organizations to fund all of conflict prevention and peace building. Because for too long, we have thought of conflict countries as economic wastelands. Those were yesterday's reality. Because thanks to that same simple, unprecedented truth that I mentioned earlier, the ability to send information and funds around the world with the push of a button, the reality of conflict countries has changed dramatically just in the last decade. The commerce and the communications is transformative. And I see this everywhere I go, every country I work in. I see cell phones charging no matter how remote the place. I see cell phones charging, I see computers working, and I see airtime being sold despite the violence. I see this in the innovation hubs and the hacker spaces that are popping up in the capitals of almost every conflict country that I go to. The Baghdad hackerspace, you may have seen it on Kickstarter, was recently funded through a Kickstarter campaign. And I see this in the announcement by Marriott recently, that its next 2 hotels will be built in Haiti and Rwanda, both recently no-go zones for investment. And I see my own impressions validated by the data. The data from the World Bank on foreign direct investment tells us that foreign direct investment has expanded dramatically in war-torn countries across the last decade. So let's take a page out of the history of the defense industry and let's kickstart a PeaceTech industry, but let's not sustain it with government funds. Instead, let's use the power of data, tech, and media to both save lives and build businesses. Let me show you what I mean. So data is the currency of the realm in our work. Conflict zones used to be data wastelands, data deserts. Today, they are data blizzards. As you know from watching YouTube and the videos that get uploaded from conflict zones before the military even knows what's happening. We use this data now, we study this data in order to have early warning, in order to anticipate violence. And that same data is of value to those corporations who need to protect their supply chains, those corporations that are operating increasingly in conflict countries. And tech, there are many, many innovative PeaceTech developments in the last couple of years. This is the Labrea Tablet. It was developed by the Guardian Project in order to protect the anonymity of democracy activists who were working in authoritarian regimes. Why can't we find that kind of technology in Best Buy or Walmart, given today's concern, given all of our concern today for online privacy? And media. Well, for many years, the international organizations have been funding peace-building media programs, radio and TV dramas and so forth. That's our Salam Shabab, our series for Iraqi youth that was funded by the government. But I know from a lot of experience that the funding invariably runs out almost just when we're starting to shift attitudes. And that's because priorities shift from governments to the next security crisis. So why not sustain those media programs using strategies of marketing strategies and corporate underwriting similar to what other mission-driven media companies like Sesame Workshops, National Geographic, how they do it. I could go on with this list because the three business lines that I mentioned, data, tech, and media, they all have numerous products, services, and customers. We just haven't thought about them this way before. Folks, after working for the better part of 2 decades in conflict countries, I do not expect us to be able to stop the guns, the tanks, the megalomaniacs, the beheadings with more logs, more text messages, more tweets, or even more cell phones. Any more than I expect us to be able to create a culture of peace and nonviolence in these countries with more drone strikes, more air power, or more boots on the ground. But our strategy for creating a safer planet has been woefully lopsided. The fiscal year 15 budget for the Department of Defense was $500 billion. The budget for all of diplomacy and development combined was $46 billion. Don't forget the budget for the center of international conflict management and peace building in this country, the United States Institute of Peace, which was $35 million. And to put all this into perspective, we found the 2008, we couldn't find more recent statistics, this is obviously a closely guarded secret, but we found the 2008 catering budget for Google, and it was $72 million. We have got to do better than this. So the PeaceTech industry that I'm talking about is a modern-day solution to a modern-day world of ubiquitous global communications and capital flows and increasing demands on government. I became convinced that we could actually do this in December when I was in India. And I met this young lady, Anu, and her friends, 3 really inspiring young ladies. All 4 of them were about 13 years old. They live in the Dharavi slums of India, one of the poorest places on the planet, and they came to show us the mobile app that they had created in order to counter gender violence. It sounded an alarm, sent a message to their friends, and it located them. It was simple, but it was effective. And they did it by downloading the free MIT do-it-yourself app maker online with the help of a mentor onto their shared laptop. And today, that application is in the Google Play Store. These young PeaceTech entrepreneurs represent a sea change happening in the world today. Like those folks that I showed you at the very beginning, they're not technologists, engineers, or trained media professionals, but they are the future of a PeaceTech industry, and they are certainly the future of a less violent planet. So, download a PeaceTech app, or contribute to a PeaceTech crowdfund, or start your own PeaceTech business. Because for the first time in human history, every one of us has the power of PeaceTech to save lives. Thank you.